Apple storage sucks. I'm sure you agree. It's expensive and you don't get a lot of it. But this over here is not a fake Mac Mini. This apparently is attempting to fix that issue. It's gonna give you more storage, redundancy, more I/O at a lower price point. Orico Data Matrix Mini. Let's find out how it works. This part of the video is brought to you by Asus ProArt PX13, the ultimate 2-in-1 creator laptop with AMD Ryzen 9 AI CPU and NVIDIA RTX 4070 GPU. The PX13 is one of the most compact and powerful 13-inch laptops out there. Create smarter and faster from anywhere with AI features and military-grade toughness. Go check out our full overview in the video description below. So here it is. As you can see, I've got the Mac Mini on the top and the Orico Data Matrix Mini on the bottom. They're exactly the same footprint, so it's gonna look very nice on your desk. Unless you have a Mac Mini, which is the new one, then it's gonna look something like that. Apparently there is something for the Mac Mini Mac as well. You don't necessarily have to have it with the Mac Mini. You can have it with your MacBook Pro. We're gonna be tested on there. It's nice to know that it kind of looks like it fits in your Mac ecosystem, whether it's Mac Studio, Mac Mini, MacBook Pros. It just is something on your desk. So what is this thing exactly? The idea of this is to incorporate hot and cold storage. Hot storage is something that you're actively working on, which often is stored on an SSD. Let's say you're a creator, you work on a project, video editing, all your stuff is on there, so it's not going to be laggy on the hard drive, which is very, very slow. But then there's also a hard drive inside, which means that your backups and kind of the cold storage, where data that you're not using so frequently and maybe more like archival purpose of a data is stored on a cheaper hard drive in there. And also a RAID support or RAID redundancy, meaning that your data is safe. So inside here is SSD and hard drive, or SSDs and hard drives. And if you're looking at the I/O, it's not just gonna give you the storage, but it's kind of a dock as well. So we've got CF Express Type B, and this goes up to 1500 megabytes per second read speeds, 10 gigabit USB Type A and another Type C, the same speed. It's nicely labeled in there as well. So whenever you've got an interface, it's easy to know which port is the best one to plug it into. SD card slot and micro SD card slot up to 300 megabytes per second. So UHS 2 speeds. On the back of the device, we've got the power button, DC in, PC in, another Thunderbolt 4 port, and this is 40 gigabits in second. This is for daisy chaining. If you want to, you can daisy chain multiple of these together and then have storage kind of for all of them. And they say that you can daisy chain up to 540 terabytes of these together to get the ultimate kind of storage solution. And also got DisplayPort. There is 3 versions of this. One is 2 big, 3 big, and 6 big. And if we're looking at the I/O of the 2 big, which I have in here, you can see that next to the DisplayPort, there is one missing compared to the 3 big. As you can see, RAID. There's like a RAID switch, hardware RAID switch that you've got on the 3 big and 2 big, which means that the 2 big has only 1 hard drive inside, but the 3 big will have 2, and then the 6 big will have more than 2. And you can actually set the RAID that you want, RAID 0, 1, 5, 10, or would you like it to be set up? And when looking at the specs between the 2 big, 3 big, and then 4 big on the website of Orico's website, interestingly, everything is 40 gigabits transmission rate, but the capacity option for the 2 bigs are 5, 9, 17, and 23. Interestingly, my version here on the box says that it's 8 plus 2 terabytes. So SSD 2 terabyte and hard drive is 8 terabytes, which is none of the options over there. So it's kind of confusing. It supports Thunderbolt 3, 4, and USB 4. USB 3.2 and backwards compatible. So it's basically like a DAS, so external hard drive enclosure, but a little bit more fancy. You can see that the 3 big also has hot data storage performance of 3000 plus megabytes per second, whereas the 2 big and 6 big seem to be only 1500, which is interesting. And as you can see, hardware support is not on the 2 big, but it is on the 3 big. and 6 big. The rest of the things seem to be exactly the same, just the capacity difference. Here you can see the daisy chained up to 5 devices together, and you can get 560 terabytes of storage. It does support Windows, Mac, and Linux, so no matter which system you're using, it supports that. In terms of the chassis, you can see another bit of grille underneath where the air goes in, and then there's some side ventilation on both of the sides there as well. There is nice rubber feet underneath there, and if I'm not mistaken, underneath the rubber are screw holes. Yep, there's screw holes in there, and we'll take it apart in a minute. Let's take a look how it works first. In the box, you do get the main device and a nice USB 4 or 40 gigabit USB Type-C cable, which is very, very short. We've got a power brick that is 180 watts, 20 volt, and 9 amperes. So let's turn it on. Power in the back, PC in for this here. And then I'm gonna connect this to my MacBook Pro that's connected to this iVanky dock as well. This has got Thunderbolt 5 USB-C on the side there. So it's connected now to this. And before I'm gonna press the power button, I wanted to check the manual that comes in the box. What are they saying? Like, how is it supposed to be set up? Because the question I have is, how do they kind of lay out the storage? Is the SSD and hard drive already configured into some kind of a hardware level where they are one kind of storage? So this would be 10 terabytes together, and it automatically shifts the data, which is cold, which is hot? Or is it just going to be kind of an enclosure that has hard drives and SSDs in there? Then I was looking at the hard drive format partition operation, which is basically how do you set it up? Like, how do you want to format all the storage that's in there? The thing is, it only gives you an option how to do it on Windows. There is nothing to be mentioned. Look at this. This is Windows, how to go to your disk management on Windows. This is Windows, all of these different steps on Windows. Here again is Windows, but nothing on Mac. But this is really meant for Mac. This is how this is all kind of marketed. So did they actually try to set it up on Mac? We're gonna check it out in a minute. And here are all the different RAID modes that you can go with, the 6 big and 3 big options. And interestingly, the hard drive capacity is not in correlation with what they're showing on the website. And here we have 4, 8, 16, and 22. But I believe on the website we just looked at was 5, 9, something like that. But what I don't understand is, why is the 6 big with slower NVMe? It does say 1500 megabytes per second compared to 3000 in the kind of middle version of this. So why, when you upgrade, you go lower again? We'll find out. Okay, so I am on the MacBook Pro here, the M4 Max, and I'm gonna press the power button. Let's see what happens. Okay, allow accessory to connect. Do you want to connect Intel Tamalis Module to this Mac? So there is some kind of Thunderbolt controller inside there. Let's connect it. Let's see what happens. Okay, we have 2 Oricos on the side here. Let's do info on one and info on the other. So they are separate. So we've got 2 terabytes of SSD plugged into there, and then 8 terabytes of hard drive that's plugged into there. And the format is APFS, so it's already pre-formatted to the Apple journaled option, which is, you know, nice. So it kind of is plug and play install for Mac. The only thing is, those fans to me, way too loud. Can you hear that? Turn it off. Turn it on. You can definitely hear it. So I've got a folder on the desktop that's 321 gigabytes in size, and I want to see what the read and write speeds are going to be. So let's just pull it onto this Orico first one and look at read data is about 1.5 gigabytes per second. So it is literally writing what they're saying, about 1500 megabytes per second. Let's leave it for a bit and then see if that actually turns down, and if there is some kind of cache or how this works, if it actually will write all of the data onto it. So we're about halfway through now, as you can see through that little circle in there, and we're still pulling very constantly the same data rate. This was just me changing the graph around, and that's why there's a dip, but it's just been going 1.5-ish gigabytes per second all the way writing it onto there. So we're almost done now, and that looked to me like a very constant 1.5 gigabytes per second right onto that drive, which is very interesting. Now, this was onto the SSD. If I'm just gonna copy that onto the hard drive bit now, and then now writing onto the hard drive, you can see we're writing roughly about 220 to 250 megabytes per second, something like that, which is a lot slower. So I guess the point that they're making is that you're not actually making a different or like a one big pool of data. You just have an SSD that's very fast in there, and then you have a hard drive that you can just expand and just have it set in there, very easily accessible, and then just have the storage all in one place so you don't have multiple dongles and so on. And as a creator, to have this nice I/O, that's better than the Mac Studio or any of the docks. That's really nice to see there as well. So we're gonna stop that right now. I'm gonna turn it off, pull the power out. Now, if you've paid attention, they're saying that there is an SSD inside and a hard drive inside that can be potentially swappable. So my question is, if we're gonna open this up, are we gonna be able to upgrade this ourselves? So opening this little lid up, we can see, voila, there is an M.2 SSD already installed. And they've been a little bit cheeky. They've put some glue, or what is this? Yeah, some actual glue installed there. But this to me seems to be exactly the same SSD as the Orico 7000. Remember these SSDs that we reviewed? If you haven't seen that, go check that one out on the channel. This here is the 4 terabyte version. The heatsink, as you can see, is exactly the same. Why use some other competitor SSDs if they could actually use their own? So what I'm gonna do is get rid of that glue in there. They put some melted plastic or something onto there. They wanted to do that so that you can't upgrade it yourself, but I want to see if we can upgrade it ourselves. Okay, that's that screw off. We're gonna have to cut it off. Okay, this side's open. This is so lame. Just put a screw on the lid that you can undo then. Like, there is no reason to glue this down and no reason to void your warranty if this was not glued in, because this is such a simple fix. So as you can see, it's just an M.2 slot in there, and I've just pulled it off. I bet you there is this Orico. If I pull this off, okay, it is it the same? What M.2 are they using? So the 4 terabyte one has slightly different I/O. So are they not even using their own SSD? So this is the 2 terabyte model. So when looking at even the difference of the SSD, as you can see, the one that they had installed is not the same Orico 7000 M.2. It's some kind of other manufacturer. I don't think this is Western Digital either. I wonder what this QR code here is. Just probably some kind of internal marking of a drive. But we've taken this off. They've used their own heatsink though. I'm gonna put in one of their own. So this is the 4 terabyte model. I'm gonna pop it in there and we'll see what happens. I'm not gonna put the heatsink on just for now. I just wanna see if it will come on, and most likely it will come on. Also, if you take the rubber feet on the side, we can see that there is screws in there as well. This Nocto screwdriver is good for that. Okay. And now, because the screws are loose, take the M.2 off. Okay, we can actually see what's going on underneath. This is just an M.2 option over there. Got a PCB here, and then let's take a look. Okay, underneath. Wonder who decided the color of the PCBs. Why is it green? Why can't it be purple, blue? Just some beige random color, whatever color the plastic comes out with. Interestingly, there's no fans on both sides. There's fan only on one side, which is over there. And because there's 2 wires, it's just a DC fan that just blows the same speed all the time. Okay, if I'm pulling it from this side, the PCB actually comes off. And what you can see is, oh, very interesting. So there is a PCB and somewhere there is a controller, probably this guy over there, Fresco something. And there is a little PCIe slot that makes a daughter board where you have a SATA connect in there, and then your hard drive is basically just plugged into there. And if you want to change the hard drive, you absolutely can. This is just some little lights ribbon cable that goes in there and then shows the lights through of these do in the front, but it's so far away. I don't know why they haven't put it a bit closer. That's like an interesting heatsink or controller for the actual Thunderbolt ports. These seem just a normal M.2 slots that you could plug something into. But then there's two of them in there, and that whole controller, actually, so the whole thing that runs the rest of the system is on this tiny bit. This big PCB is a daughter board to that one. And oh wow, whoever has done this in the factory has made a little mistake here already. Can you see this bit over there? They've put a bit of glue or something in there, but there is already a little scratch that goes over these wires. Fortunately, they're not touching, but this was not something that I did because I just pulled it up from the side, so my scratches would be kind of on the side somewhere over there. Now, it's not touching anything in there, but it's still bare and a little bit of a scratch in there. I bet the quality control didn't see that. And that's why you've got a heatsink in there as well that kind of cools down the probably Thunderbolt controllers that are connected to M.2 for the rest of the things, and then everything else is on that board. So if you did want to cheat, you could just buy the lowest end version of this, do a little bit of DIY, plug in a new hard drive because they're not in any shape or form linked to this or Apple format or anything. This is just a hard drive that you can store or get from the shelf. Plug it in there, put a new one in there. You have to undo a few more screws and actually get it in there and undo the screws from the side. I'm gonna test it with the M.2 slot because that is a bit easier to check and control. So I'm gonna put this back. Okay, the board just pops back down. Bear in mind that you pull it from the front side, not the back side, because the front has the actual PCIe slot that you have to plug it in there. So let's put these screws back. I am not going to put the rest of it in. I am just going to pop this M.2 into that slot. It's perfectly fine DIY. Plug in the power and the PC in, press the button. Okay, the Mac's open. Let's take a look what happens. Very interesting. The disk you attached was not readable by this computer. That means that it recognized that it is just a normal slot. And if you're gonna do it, here's what you're gonna do. You press initialize, which takes you to the disk utility on the Mac. So as you can see, the Orico, that's already the 8 terabyte hard drive that's underneath there. That's what we already had. Then the other bit is the Orico Media, which is the new one, 4 terabyte. So what we're gonna do here is press erase on the top there. We're gonna type in 4 terabyte Orico, format APFS or exFAT, whichever one. Let's say you plug something in and you want to change it, you can do that as well. Erase, formatting, boom, we've got it connected. Ooh, I'm just wondering if I upgraded it. Wait a second. So I've got the 4 terabyte Orico here, the playback. Let me just pull that on. Still about 1.5 gigabytes per second. And I know that this SSD can do more. So the actual link bottleneck here is the actual controller, or however they're doing. So the 3 big has some kind of a different controller. Do you remember the 2 USB-C's controller, or the little disc that was on the back in there? So that seems to be the bottleneck, not actually the SSD in there. So you can pretty much pop in anything that you want. I just put in 4 terabytes. It's completely fine. Interestingly, they don't even offer a 4 terabyte SSD option with this one. I just popped one in. It works just fine. Just bear in mind, use a heatsink because, is it getting warm? Yeah, it's getting warmish. Unfortunately, I don't have 8 terabyte NVMe to actually try it, but I don't see why it should not work. It's just a normal M.2 slot. Just pop it in there, it should work. So conclusion, should you be buying this or not? What's the actual benefit of this? I like the product idea that you have your SSD and hard drive both in one, very easy if you're using a Mac, plug-in option. You just have to manage the SSD and then hard drive. Obviously, when you go with a bigger version, you can also get hardware RAID to get some kind of redundancy on your actual disks. And if you don't need a NAS, that's a pretty interesting option. So it's basically directly attached storage option for Mac. Now, in terms of the pricing, I feel like they've gone a little bit overboard, a little bit too expensive. Now, let's take a look at the price point exactly here. So, Orico, check out the links in the description below. By the way, the latest pricing will be down below there. But they're saying it's $660 and you can get 20% off, which means that the total price is roughly around $527 for this 10 terabytes. Now, $527, remember that. If you're actually looking at how much does one of these hard drives cost there, 8 terabytes, $150, plus the 2 terabyte NVMe from Orico is around $120, something like that, which takes us to roughly about $270, which means that the rest of the enclosure costs around $257. So you're roughly paying the same model here for the enclosure as much as the actual storage. In one sense, it feels a little bit of a ripoff. At the same time, on the other hand, this is USB 4 or Thunderbolt 4, and their controllers are very, very fast, 40 gigabits per second, and you can daisy chain them together. Now, at the same time, if we're looking at something like this, which is a Cas's 40 gigabits per second M.2 NVMe, which is just $90, and that one actually offers you some ports here as well. I believe this has, oh, this one has 2 for 200. And look, you've got an HDMI port there as well, and another 40 gigabits per second option there as well. So for $200, you could get that. Or you could get a dock, for example, this, which has NVMe inside, dual SSD, which means it puts NVMe in there and you can put 2.5-inch drive in there. For roughly around $100, you can get both. Now, this is not gonna be as fast. It's gonna be 10 gigabits per second, so roughly about 1,000 megabytes per second-ish, around there, compared to this one, which is maybe 50% faster, 1,500. And you don't get the CF Express card in there, but you only get these card readers. But the dock is kind of the same. It is a little bit to the expensive side. And I think they wanted to kind of appeal to the Mac audience that kind of pays for Mac storage anyway. But if you're thinking about the marketing, the way they're saying the cold storage and hot storage, and you can have both in there, it looks like it's very, very fancy and it automatically backs up the SSD onto the hard drive. But actually what's happening is you just have a very expensive enclosure. You have SSD and then hard drive storage. And then if you've got the higher end models, the hard drives just backing themselves up on a hard RAID level or function, which is just a little DAS. It's not necessarily the cheapest option. It's convenient. Indeed it is. I wish I could actually change the fan speed. This fan is loud. Concluding my conclusion, I actually like the product. I think I'm liking that there's more products like these on the market that offer you alternatives to the Mac storage that's out there. But since I've already done my version of the Mac storage video, if you haven't seen that one, go check that one out, where I'm giving the ultimate best bang for buck solutions for all of the Mac storage options out there. I feel like I've kind of recommended a bit more DIY and even more money saving option, the best bang for buck for your money. But if you want to maybe get less DIY and kind of hassle-free, just plug and play version, this is an interesting option. And when you cut the glue, your NVMe storage can actually be extended very, very easily to 8 terabytes if wanted to. I'm gonna leave some SSDs in the description below if you wanna check them out. If you're interested in this, check it out in the video description below, and I'll see you next time. I'd love to know what you think in the comment section below. Bye-bye.